Let's code this skirt pattern in Sewist Online Designer. I am now logged into Sewist.com and have browsed to my pattern library. To create a new pattern, I simply click this button. I will assign a name and an alias to my new pattern algorithm and put it into the right category. I am going to use my new pattern on a basic sloper. I use this button to browse through the saved slopers. I usually use the diskette button to redraft pattern, as it saves the algorithm at the same time. I am thus certain that my code has been successfully saved to Sewist Cloud at any time. Okay, we've got a basic skirt on the screen now. I am going to change scale so that I can see the most of my pattern. I simply click this button with a zoom and number 1 inside it. I feel the waist is too high for this very pattern. I am going to tweak the sloper using one of its variables. The full list of variables is given below in the messages. Let's say waist drop to 15% from the natural level. Maybe that is a bit too much. I shall switch grid settings to show centimeter lines, so that I can estimate better. The total drop is 3 centimeters. I would make it less. Let's set waist drop variable to just 10%. That is okay. Let's consider the length of the skirt. It is at the knee level, so I will leave it as is for now. The main decorative feature is this folded piece. This is what we shall concentrate on now. Each folded detail seems to be attached approximately at this point along the waistline. It reaches hips level at the side seam, so we shall use this point when drafting our pattern. The corners of the folds are somewhere at these places. We need to place points here before we proceed with manipulating the folds. I shall start with the point on the side seam. It is going to be the second reference point after the first corner, so I'll give it the name Z2. I am placing it right in the middle of the upper part of the side seam. There is the curve named front side skirt. I use split function and divide it at 1/2 of its length. The new portions of the curves get names FSS1 and FSS2. Let's redraft pattern and have a look. We now need to locate the first corner. It is somewhere in between hip point and dart point, both horizontally and vertically. I shall place it using calculations of coordinates. I am going to use function point and give math formulas for x and y coordinates. The x-axis goes from left to right, so I will use x coordinate of this point. I double-click the point to insert its name into code. I now add point x. This is how I refer to the x-coordinate of a point. I now need to move to the right, that is add to the x-coordinate. Let's say we add distance between the dart point and the hip point divided by 2. Now to the y-coordinate. The y-axis goes from top towards bottom, so we start at the dart point V2 and add towards hip point. Let's redraft and check. Okay, so the lines of the folded details are to go like this. But the piece will be curved around hips and our point seems too far towards side seam. Let's move it towards front. Instead of dividing by 2 we shall multiply by 0.7. This looks better. We now need to place the last corner point. I am going to calculate its coordinates. I shall use the point Z2 at the side seam, and the dart point V2. Again I am using x and y coordinates of various points in order to define coordinate of the Z3 point. Let us redraft and see. I think it needs to be moved to the right a bit. That looks right. You may ask now, why all the trouble with coordinates and proportions? Why not just move points by 2 centimeters up and 3 centimeters down? Well, you may do it this way of course, and the program will obey. However, I'm going to grade this piece across very many sizes. It is very probable that 3 centimeters along x-axis is a very different thing for hips girth of 120 centimeters than it is for hips width of 80 centimeters. It is also very probable that 3 centimeters along y-axis is a very different thing for a total height of 140 centimeters and 200 centimeters. We may end up further than the dart point or lower than the hip point. This way we are safe. We will never go outside the limits that are set by our reference points. Now to the top part. We don't need any darts on our decorative piece, so let us close this dart. I use the function rotate. I am going to rotate the center part of the waistline around the dart point, at exactly the dart level. I want to be able to use the original and the rotated curve separately, so I'll add a suffix for the new curve. Let's redraft and see. The center part has been rotated and has a name with an R at the end. Let's now locate the upper corner of this piece. I am going to split the curve I have just rotated. Sometimes I type the names of the objects, as I remember most of them by heart by now. Sometimes I just double-click them to insert into code. To refer to the object's length, I simply add .l. I would say this point is at some 60% of the curve's length. I am going to need the parts of the curve, so I give them names. Usually I just use abbreviations of the name of the original object and add 1 and 2, but you can really name them whatever. Here's our point, and here's how the style lines are going to go. The upper part of the peplum is folded alongside seam. It is not that curvy here, and I am going to simplify it to a line. I don't insist this style decision is right, as you may decide to draft two separate layers and sew their edges into the side seam. Still, for the sake of this demonstration, I shall code one folded piece. Our first fold line is going to be between point Z2 and upper end of the side seam. I am going to move the upper edge of the peplum piece here and there. It now consists of two separate curves. It is not too convenient, so I shall unite them into one path. I am using the function path, and I list the objects that are inside this part. I use double-click to insert the first element. I have to, however, several times to find my next piece, just because there are several objects in this place. I hold Alt button and double-click. The object is inserted with a comma in front of its name. Now I need to unfold the upper part of the peplum. I will mirror it against the first point line. In the mirror function, I mention all the objects that need to be mirrored. Then the reference line, it is fold 1. Then I add suffix m so that the mirrored objects get new names. Looks good. The top edge of the peplum and the corner were mirrored against the fold line. The second fold line will go between points Z1 and Z4. Let us add it using the function line. I am going to style both fold lines and make them dashed so that they are different from other objects. The two lines have become dashed. We now need to unfold our piece once again. This time we will need to mirror the part we have just flipped, and also the part from the second fold line to side seam. I am using mirror function again. I double-click objects to add them to the list. My reference line for mirror is fold 2. I will add suffix n to distinguish names of the mirrored objects. Let's redraft and have a look. I shall rescale pattern again so that I can see all of it. I am checking the future contour of the peplum. Oops, I forgot to mirror one of the objects. I'll add it to the mirror function and redraft my pattern. Good, it's in place now. The drafting is finished. I now need to create the actual pattern pieces. This is the Code Help button. It contains templates for most functions in Sewist Pattern Designer. I select Objects, then Pattern, and insert the template into code. I edit the name of the pattern piece, add all contour objects clockwise. We can delete both fold and flip lines. This is unnecessary for this block. If you need any texts, or marks, or lines, or curves that don't belong to the block contour, to be included onto the printed block, you may add them to INC. Let's redraft. Here's our back piece colored in blue. I shall add another pattern block in the same manner. My next pattern block will be front skirt. I want the software to know that this block is cut on fold. The fold line of this pattern is between points W1 and L1. I'll add all included objects before I move on to tracing contour. Maybe it would be helpful to have the style lines drawn on the pattern piece. This is also a nice occasion to demonstrate another feature in the eye and see if you need to add a line or a path between two or more points. You may just mention them in brackets and separate by comma. Our style lines go from HS1 to Z1, then to Z2 and then to Z3. It's a broken line showing the bottom edge of the peplum. Now to tracing the contour. When we have a fold mentioned, it is important to start from the next object after the second point of fold, and then you just go clockwise and finish at the first point of the fold. For this block we need to edit quantity of the pieces to be cut. We don't need two separate pieces, one straight and one mirrored. We need just the one, so we edit parameter QTY and set it to 1,0. Here's our front piece. It contains the path for the bottom edge of the peplum. The software also added the fold mark. Now to the peplum block. I repeat the same steps. We need to trace the block clockwise, but what if the direction of an object is opposite? We then add it with a minus. When you hover an object, you will see that it ends a violet, the first point, and orange, the last point. This curve is reversed. We'll add it with a minus. You don't have to draw straight lines for the contour. You may just mention the sequence of the points. The software will connect them with straight lines and draw the contour of the block. The quantity is correct. We need two pieces cut. Fold and flip are not needed. I shall include both fold lines onto block. If pattern blocks are on top of each other, it is good to have them in different colors. Here's the color cheat sheet button. When you click a color on the palette, its name is inserted into code. Here's our peplum block. It looks okay. Let us add a waistband. I am going to use a basic sloper again. Redraft. Rescale. All the elements of the waistband are there. We just need to create the pattern block. Waistband block will be folded along upper edge. We need to cut it from the main fabric, and also from the fusible interfacing. Let's zoom in to see the markings better. And change color to gold just for fun. I shall make the browser window wider so that we can see more buttons. This is actually a pre-release version. We'll work on navigation to have it visible in all screens. The pattern looks good, but maybe I am missing something. All pattern blocks are on top of each other. Here's another view of the same pattern. We are going to make it a part of the instructions. All blocks are separate and we can clearly see their elements. I believe it would be useful to have a notch on the side seam, just to know where the peplum fold should end. I use function mark, and place a T-shaped marking at the point Z2, perpendicular at the curve in this place. The mark has been created. It now needs to be included into the pattern piece. It is there. Let's just check if the quantities are right. We may also check the quantities in the spec sheet. As you can see, the spec sheet has all the blocks area calculated. The quantities are mentioned in this column. There's also a list of all size measurements that were referred to in the pattern algorithm. The current size measurements are listed both in centimeters and in inches. Now let us see if this pattern is graded well across sizes. Here's the button we need to choose a new size. Let it be the same total height, but a more slender figure. The pattern was redrafted, and it is definitely smaller. No errors, it is okay. Let's try a bigger size. The peplum piece looks very different, and still it is correct. It is just that the hips are wider, and the angle of the fold line is different. Just another thing you wouldn't account for when using traditional grading. Let's try yet another size. Looks good on the screen. We spent about 20 minutes working in Sewist Pattern Designer, and we now have this pattern for any size. No need to grade. All seams are adjusted, all notches are in place. Again, any size. In the pattern library we can see a small preview of this pattern. Much easier to manage than a file name in a folder. We hope you enjoyed this presentation. Stay tuned. Release is just weeks away. If you are interested in beta testing the pre-release version, please send us an email at info@sewist.com. Happy sewing!